What if one of the greatest minds in science came face to face with a reality no textbook can explain? What if Carl Sagan, the iconic astrophysicist, had a secret experience? One that shattered his understanding of life, death, and the universe. Today, you're about to hear details from a classified CIA interview, never released to the public, where Sagan describes what he saw in a near-death state. This isn't speculation or theory. It's hidden knowledge, locked away for decades, now uncovered. Prepare yourself. This will change everything you thought you knew about consciousness. Carl Sagan is a name synonymous with science, curiosity, and the vast cosmos. His words once brought distant galaxies into our homes and made the unimaginable feel within reach. The public remembers him as the rational voice that bridged the gap between the stars and the human mind, an icon of skepticism who demanded evidence and cautioned against unfounded beliefs. But beneath this well-known image lies a chapter of his life rarely discussed, an experience that challenged everything he believed about consciousness and reality itself. In the late 1970s, at the height of Cold War tensions, the CIA was secretly conducting experiments into altered states of mind, psychic phenomena, and near-death experiences. These studies, hidden from the public eye, aimed to explore whether consciousness could be manipulated, projected, or accessed beyond the confines of the physical brain. It was a time when governments worldwide were obsessed with pushing the boundaries of human potential and also with weaponizing what they discovered. During this period, Carl Sagan became an unlikely participant in a classified project. While most remember him as a scientist grounded firmly in empirical evidence, a sealed interview reveals a far more complex story. The documents, only recently declassified and heavily redacted, detail a near-death event Sagan underwent as part of a risky experiment involving sensory deprivation and induced clinical death. What most people don't know is that these sessions were not just clinical or medical. They were experiments that touched on the forbidden realms of the mind, areas where mainstream science feared to tread. The goal was to unlock what happens when consciousness crosses the threshold between life and death. The CIA's interest wasn't merely academic. They wanted to see if the mind could retain information beyond bodily death or access hidden knowledge that could be weaponized or harnessed for espionage. Sagan's near-death experience, captured in this interview, paints a picture that contradicts the strictly materialistic view dominant in his time, and still prevalent today. Rather than fading into darkness, his consciousness seemed to expand, shifting into realms described in mysticism, spiritual traditions, and ancient esoteric teachings. The interview records his descriptions of light, unity, and a profound sense of timelessness, details that mainstream narratives have systematically excluded. What's more, this interview was banned from all major scientific publications and disappeared from CIA archives for decades, only resurfacing after a whistleblower leak in 2023. It was deemed too dangerous, too disruptive, threatening to unravel established beliefs about life, death, and the nature of existence. Most people have never heard this story, not because it lacks evidence, but because it clashes with what institutions want you to believe. The scientific community, locked in rigid paradigms, has historically dismissed near-death experiences as hallucinations or chemical byproducts. The media, too, avoids these topics, fearing backlash or ridicule. But this interview challenges that silence. It offers exclusive knowledge, fragments of forbidden truths that have been suppressed to maintain control over our understanding of reality. Carl Sagan, the skeptic who demanded proof, became a witness to a dimension beyond time and space, recorded in a conversation the world was never meant to hear. You, watching this now, stand at a crossroads between ordinary knowledge and hidden truths. This story will ask you to question what you think you know about consciousness and the afterlife. It will invite you to explore the veil between science and spirituality, between the seen and the unseen. Why did the CIA fear this knowledge? Why has it been erased from public discourse? And what does this mean for you, sitting here wondering if there is more to life than what the senses reveal? You are about to step through a door only a few have dared to open. The revelations that follow will stretch your perception, challenge your beliefs, and perhaps awaken a part of you long forgotten. Keep watching, because the most profound insights are yet to come. Now that we've uncovered the existence of this secret interview, let's step inside that cold interrogation room and listen closely to what Carl Sagan revealed. An experience that challenges everything you thought you knew about life, death, and the nature of consciousness. What you are about to hear comes from the shadows, a secret long buried beneath layers of classified documents and government silence. This is the first time the full details of a CIA interview with Carl Sagan have come to light. The interview, hidden for nearly half a century, was only recently leaked in a wave of declassified files from a whistleblower who risked everything to reveal what was meant to stay hidden. This newly uncovered interview tells a different story. It reveals a man who faced an experience so profound it shattered his scientific certainty and plunged him into a realm most would call spiritual, a near-death state that challenged everything he thought he knew about consciousness and existence. The setting of the interview itself is stark and unsettling. The CIA's interrogation room was sterile, cold, a place designed to strip away comfort, to confront the subject with raw reality. The metal table reflected harsh overhead lights. The air smelled faintly of disinfectant, sharp and clinical. It was here, in this barren space, that Sagan recounted the vivid, almost otherworldly details of his near-death experience. He described slipping away from his body, a sensation of dissolving into light, of entering a space beyond time and form. The walls of the room seemed to close in as you listened to his words, and yet, in his description, you can feel a vastness expanding, endless, bright, and timeless. It's a stark contrast, the bleak, lifeless interrogation room versus the luminous, boundless realm Sagan's consciousness explored. This interview is more than just a conversation. It is a glimpse into something the powers that be tried desperately to erase. Large portions of the original tapes were heavily redacted or completely erased. Footage of key moments, the moments where Sagan appears to describe contact with an intelligence beyond human comprehension, are missing. The official records read like an incomplete puzzle, with glaring gaps where the most explosive insights should be. Why was this knowledge censored? What about Sagan's account threatened to unravel the dominant scientific narrative? For decades, the official stance remained that consciousness is merely a product of the brain, a temporary byproduct of chemical reactions and electrical impulses. Anything else was dismissed as fantasy or delusion. But here, in the voice of one of the greatest scientific minds of the 20th century, is a testimony that defies those limits. What most people don't realize is that this interview was never intended for public ears. It was locked away under layers of secrecy, accessible only to select intelligence officials and government scientists. It was classified as top secret because it posed an uncomfortable question. What if consciousness survives death? What if it can transcend the physical body and access realities beyond our understanding? You're not just hearing a story about Carl Sagan. You're witnessing a crack in the facade that mainstream science has carefully maintained. This is exclusive knowledge, fragments of truth that have been suppressed to preserve the illusion of control over what we're allowed to believe about life and death. As you absorb this revelation, keep in mind the missing pieces. The moments erased from the tapes, the censored phrases, the deliberate silences. They're breadcrumbs left behind, clues pointing toward a deeper mystery that remains just out of reach. This secret interview isn't the whole story. It's the beginning of something far bigger. So ask yourself, what would it mean if the scientific icon who brought the stars into your living room also glimpsed a hidden realm beyond death? How would it change your understanding of reality if the truth he shared in that cold interrogation room was real and has been hidden from you all along? You're about to find out. Now, step closer into the very moment Carl Sagan confronted a reality beyond science, where light, time, and consciousness dissolve into something far more mysterious. The interview delves deeper as Sagan recounts the moments surrounding his near-death experience, a chapter that mainstream history never acknowledges. Whether it was a sudden medical crisis, a secret experimental procedure, or something else cloaked in official silence, what he describes is no ordinary brush with death. It is a journey beyond the limits of science, beyond time itself. In his own words, Sagan describes being enveloped by an ethereal light, a luminous presence that did not merely illuminate the darkness, but seemed to dissolve it entirely. He speaks of stepping into a timeless realm, a place where the usual boundaries of space and chronology fell away, leaving only a profound sense of unity and peace. It was a place beyond words, he admits, a realm where everything I had ever known was both revealed and rendered meaningless. This spiritual landscape is painted with breathtaking clarity, though always tempered by the scientist's own disbelief. He compares it to a veil lifting from the very fabric of reality, exposing a hidden dimension that science had not yet mapped. Sagan, the ultimate skeptic, struggled to reconcile this experience with his lifelong dedication to reason and empirical evidence. Yet, no amount of scientific theory could fully explain the luminous presence he encountered, the feeling of being simultaneously infinite and intimately connected to everything. The interview captures the tension between Sagan's rational mind and the overwhelming spiritual insight that defied logic. What if, he suggests, our understanding of consciousness is only a shadow of what truly exists? This question hangs in the air, inviting you to wonder. Could the part of you that thinks, feels, and remembers be more than neurons firing inside a skull? The ethereal light he describes is more than a metaphor, but an awakening. It signals a rupture in ordinary perception, a moment when the veils of physical reality slip aside to reveal something far deeper. The experience challenges the belief that death is an end, hinting instead at a continuity that the scientific establishment refuses to acknowledge. What most people don't realize is that this near-death experience was never meant to be public. The transcripts of this interview were heavily redacted, with entire segments erased, moments where Sagan's voice faltered and he struggled to find language for what he had seen. These missing pieces form breadcrumb mysteries, teasing at a profound knowledge too controversial for the world to digest. You are left to ask yourself, What if the scientific worldview, the one that has dominated for centuries, is only a fragment of the truth? What if the rational mind, powerful as it is, cannot fully grasp what consciousness truly is? This hidden experience suggests that reality extends beyond the measurable, beyond the observable, into a realm where spirit and matter merge. This revelation will never let you see Carl Sagan the same way again. The man celebrated as a champion of science was also a witness to a hidden truth, one that shatters the neat categories of skeptic and believer. You stand at the threshold of understanding something forbidden, a secret caught between light and shadow, science and spirit. And just when you think you've grasped the edge of this mystery, the interview hints at even deeper revelations, waiting for you in the parts of the tapes that remain sealed, erased by forces that fear what this knowledge could awaken within us all. Now that you've seen how time itself dissolved before Sagan's eyes, it's time to follow him deeper into a presence that didn't just surround him, but spoke to him. From beyond the veil of space, reason, and everything we think is real. As the interview presses forward, Sagan speaks more slowly. His voice changes. The precision of a scientist gives way to something more reverent, almost fragile. He begins to describe what happened after the light surrounded him, and what came next defies everything he had ever believed about space and time. He says time didn't stop, it vanished. There was no ticking, no movement from moment to moment. Instead, there was only presence, an endless now. He called it a field of awareness where all moments coexist. The future was not ahead. The past wasn't behind. They were both here, folded into each other like waves collapsing into a single, infinite sea. And in that sea, there was sound, but not any sound you've heard before. He describes it as a resonance without origin, like the hum of existence itself, vibrating beneath all things. The colors were unlike any in the known spectrum, hues that shimmered, breathed, responded to thought. He says emotions became visible, that love had shape, that wonder had weight. He pauses in the recording. You can hear him trying to contain something, not fear or doubt, but awe. Carl Sagan, the man who taught millions to seek hard truth in the stars, was trying to explain a reality that no telescope could ever find. He said, "It was as if the cosmos knew me." That sentence alone was redacted in some versions of the transcript, but in the full leak, you can hear him say it with complete certainty. This wasn't a hallucination. It wasn't the mind breaking down. It was a vision of truth, one that left him forever changed. For decades, Sagan taught that the universe was indifferent, vast, cold, mechanistic. But what he experienced was the opposite. He described it as warm, intelligent, and awake. Here's where the mystery deepens. Sagan believed he had briefly touched what some mystics call the universal field, a dimension where consciousness is not an individual spark but part of a boundless fire. He said it felt familiar, as if he had always known it, but forgotten, like returning to a home beyond birth. What most people don't realize is that near the end of this section of the interview, the recording skips. Just a few seconds, a hard cut, a break in continuity. What was removed? Some believe this is where he began to describe a presence, something or someone in that realm of timelessness. A voice not his own, a consciousness that showed him something. The details are gone, scrubbed, replaced by static, but his tone when the tape resumes is unmistakable. He is shaken, moved, and quieter than before. There's a reason this portion was marked sensitive compartmented information by the CIA. The idea that a scientist, one of the most trusted public intellectuals of the 20th century, might have touched something beyond space-time, and possibly received knowledge from it, is a truth too volatile for headlines. And yet, he hints at it. "You don't travel through this place," he says. "You become it." Let that sink in. What if time is not something we move through, but something consciousness projects? What if the moment you step outside the illusion of time, you aren't seeing the future or the past? You're remembering where you actually are. You've been told reality is made of particles, forces, equations. But what if it's made of awareness? And what if the reason you forget that is by design? Some researchers speculate this realm, what Sagan called the timeless field, is already known to certain intelligence agencies, not as a myth, but as a fact. The kind of fact that threatens every institution built on fear, scarcity, and linear control. So, ask yourself, why would a tape like this be hidden for so long? And, more importantly, why reveal it now? Because maybe, just maybe, you were meant to remember too. You've seen what Sagan witnessed, but now we step into what he heard. Because beyond the light, beyond time itself, something was waiting. And it didn't just show him the truth, it spoke it. By this point in the interview, Sagan's voice had changed. He was no longer speaking as a scientist recounting an event. He was warning, and what he said next never made it into the public transcripts. He hinted carefully, deliberately, at forces that had no interest in the truth reaching people like you. Institutions, he said, that build their power on the illusion that consciousness is contained and temporary. He never named them. He didn't need to. The unease in the room is palpable. You can almost hear the temperature drop in the audio. His interrogator asks him to clarify. Sagan responds not with data, but with a sentence that was partially censored in every version of the tape. If humanity remembered what it truly is, the fear that holds the world together would vanish. That sentence ends mid-breath in the public cut, but the leaked version captures the full weight of it. You hear silence, then a faint click, then the tape resumes, a few minutes later. Gone are entire minutes of dialogue. Gone are references to a realm outside the reach of control. Gone are the parts where Sagan suggests that near-death experiences are not rare accidents, but ancient doorways long kept secret. This wasn't just censorship, it was concealment. Because this knowledge doesn't just question the structure of modern science, it threatens the foundation of modern society. If you are more than a body, more than a brain, if your awareness exists beyond time, then why would you obey systems built on fear of loss, decay, and death? What most people don't realize is that efforts to suppress near-death revelations have been underway for decades. Sagan wasn't the first to speak of this light. He was just the most dangerous because he had a platform, credibility, and first-hand experience. Within classified documents adjacent to the interview, there are notes from CIA handlers expressing concern. Disclosure of full tape content may disrupt institutional trust, one memo reads. Another states plainly, subject's account crosses into metaphysical territory inappropriate for scientific authority figures. Translation: they didn't want you to hear this, because if someone like Carl Sagan could question the limits of the material world, others might follow. So ask yourself, What forces resist your awakening? Who benefits when you believe you're just flesh and neurons? And what would change, truly change, if humanity accepts that life doesn't end but expands? Sagan's warnings weren't loud. They weren't defiant. They were whispered, embedded in pauses and glances and clipped sentences. But they were there. And now, so are you. Up until now, you've seen glimpses, fractures in the story you were told about science, death, and the mind. But here's where the curtain pulls back, because Sagan's experience wasn't an isolated vision. It was part of something deliberately hidden. And the ones hiding it weren't afraid of death. They were afraid of what comes after. If you're wondering why the CIA would care about a scientist's near-death experience, you're asking the right question. Because this wasn't a one-time curiosity. It was part of something much larger. What most people don't realize is that during the height of the Cold War, intelligence agencies weren't just racing for weapons and satellites. They were racing for the mind. The unexplored frontier of human consciousness became a battlefield, one that never made it to the newspapers. Project Stargate, MK Ultra, Operation Center Lane. Behind each of these names lies a staggering truth, that governments were pouring millions into researching psychic phenomena, remote viewing, out-of-body travel, and, yes, near-death experiences. Why? Because they had seen evidence that consciousness could reach beyond the limits of space and time. And if that was true, it could be weaponized or, worse, liberated. When Carl Sagan experienced what he described in that hidden interview, he wasn't just speaking to curious scientists. He was being assessed by a machine far colder, one designed to measure threats, to contain disruptions. His testimony wasn't cataloged under science. It was placed under control. There is a classified division within these agencies, its full name still unknown, that specifically archived what were called non-physical events with measurable psychological impact. In plain terms, spiritual encounters with tactical potential. Sagan's experience was filed there, not because he was a threat, but because what he saw was. He described consciousness as unbound, capable of perceiving without the body, remembering across lifetimes, and interacting with dimensions untouched by physical laws. In the wrong hands, that kind of knowledge unravels the very basis of military dominance. Think about it. If awareness can't be confined, if thought can reach across time and space, then no secret is safe, no strategy secure, and no one can be controlled by fear of death. That's why it was buried. That's why the pages were redacted. And that's why you've never heard this part of Sagan's life. But there's more. In recently declassified memos, buried under a tangle of numbers and cryptonyms, there are references to other interviews. Other near-death survivors with backgrounds in science, philosophy, and even intelligence itself. One memo refers cryptically to a second-phase contact with a physicist who reaffirmed Subject Sagan's claims of continuity beyond time. That physicist's name is blacked out, the interview date is missing, and the audio has never surfaced. Breadcrumbs, left behind on purpose or by accident. You've been told the mind is an accident of biology. But what if that was the lie? Told not to protect you, but to preserve power. The deeper you go, the clearer it becomes. This was never about science versus spirituality. It was about control versus awakening. And now, for the first time, the control is slipping. Let's take a look at what all of these did to him. Because once a mind crosses the veil, even for a moment, It doesn't come back the same. And if you listen closely, you'll hear the echoes of that shift in everything he left behind. After the interview ended, after the transcripts were sealed, after the tape was shelved in a vault so deep it may as well have been buried beneath reality, Carl Sagan returned to public life. But something was different, not in the headlines, not in the sound bites, but in the spaces between his words. In a lecture at Cornell, months after his near-death encounter, he paused unexpectedly while discussing the origins of the universe. His tone shifted, his cadence slowed, and for just a moment, the scientist, the ever-rational astronomer, spoke like a man who had seen behind the curtain. "We are made of star stuff," he said, "but perhaps we are also returning to where the stars themselves were born." It wasn't what he said, but how he said it. Witnesses described his voice as quieter than usual, almost reverent. Others said his eyes seemed distant, as if reliving something beyond memory, something beyond language. And though Sagan never wrote explicitly about his experience, patterns began to appear. In private notes recovered after his death, he scribbled a phrase repeatedly: "There is more than light. There is the source of light." Another reads, "The veil between science and soul is thinner than we think." These weren't the musings of a man clinging to logic. They were the reflections of someone who had seen and who now carried a silence inside him that no formula could express. He never became religious, never joined a spiritual movement, but those closest to him say he became softer, more introspective. And when asked about death in his final interviews, he didn't offer the cold, confident denial the public expected. Instead, he paused, and in that pause was the presence of something remembered. It's easy to dismiss a near-death experience as hallucination, as the final flicker of a fading brain. But ask yourself, why would it leave a man like Sagan changed forever? Why would someone who spent a lifetime deconstructing myth suddenly begin speaking in metaphor? Why did the questions get bigger, just when the answers were supposed to be settled? What most people don't realize is that true transformation rarely announces itself. It doesn't march through the door. It whispers behind the scenes. It turns certainty into wonder. It replaces fear with quiet awe. And for Sagan, that whisper echoed through the rest of his life. He never told the world what he saw, but he didn't need to. He left you a trail, in metaphors, in pauses, in soft, haunted words that now sound different, if you know what to listen for. So now the question turns to you. What shifts in your life when you glimpse something greater than yourself? Because once you've touched the edge of eternity, you never see time the same way again. Up to this point, every secret, every revelation has been leading to a hidden truth, one so powerful it had to be buried. Now, we reach the moment they tried to erase from history. Not everything from the interview survived. In the CIA archive logs, there's a note. Simple, almost forgettable. Segment redacted due to psychological risk. What was in that segment? No one will say. The original reel is missing. The transcript skips an entire 7 minutes, and one technician who handled the footage later claimed off-record that what he heard didn't sound human. It sounded like something speaking through him. Sagan had reached a point in the interview where words began to break down. He described images he couldn't fully translate, symbols of light, sounds that bent time, beings made of thought, and then silence. That's the part they removed. Some say it was because the material couldn't be verified. Others believe it was because it could. What if those missing minutes held the final truth, the thing Sagan saw but knew the world wasn't ready to hear? What if it wasn't just a vision, but a message? And, more importantly, who decided you shouldn't hear it? This is where the trail goes dark, but not cold, because whispers still circulate. Mentions of a second reel, a duplicate archive sent to a private scientific trust, and a final page in Sagan's personal journal that ends mid-sentence. We'll explore all of it soon. Because the question isn't just what was erased. The real question is, why are they so afraid of what he saw?